In this lesson, we're looking at the vertex form of a quadratic function, and we're going to learn how to identify the vertex using this form, as well as find the axis of symmetry and the minimum and maximum value using the vertex form. So let's go ahead and get into the lesson. Recall that the vertex of a quadratic equation is the highest or the lowest point on the graph. That is an ordered pair, and we have that right here. We have the ordered pair of 4 for our vertex for this graph, and the axis of symmetry is just the x value of the vertex, and so our axis of symmetry here would be x is equal to 0, and this graph has a maximum because that graph goes down, so it is the highest point on the graph. All right, and remember that the graph of a quadratic function is a parabola, so let's go ahead and get into some problems using vertex form. Vertex form is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k, where h and k, or hk, is the vertex of the graph. So remember, the vertex of a graph is an ordered pair. In every ordered pair, we have an x value first, and then our y value would be second. And so we could say that our h is really the x value of the vertex, and then the k is really the y value of the vertex. Now the axis of symmetry is just the x value of the vertex, so we could say that the axis of symmetry is x equals h, or we would just plug in whatever h is from our vertex form, and our maximum or minimum value is the y value of the vertex. So let's go ahead and try some problems using this form. So let's take a look at these three problems here. We want to identify the vertex, whether it is a maximum or minimum, and what is that maximum or minimum, and identify the axis of symmetry. So the vertex here, if we notice, we don't have a k, so there's no k term. So if there's no k, our k would just be 0. And we have a 1 here, or minus 1. If you look in our formula to the right here, that is x minus h. So since we already have a minus 1 here, our original vertex, or our x value, would be a positive 1. Since there's no k, my k is just 0. Now, we want to know if it's a maximum or a minimum value, and we determine that by checking to see whether that graph goes up or down. If you remember, what determines whether or not a graph goes up or down? Well, our a value. So our a value here is -1. Remember, we don't put a 1, but that is a -1. So since that is negative, our graph goes down. So remember, if a is positive, the graph goes up. If a is negative, the graph goes down. So since our a is negative, that graph goes down, and so that will have a maximum because the graph goes down. And we're looking at the y value of the vertex. So the y value of the vertex is just 0. Okay. Our axis of symmetry cuts the graph in half equally. And remember, it is just the x value of the vertex. So right here, that would be the graph x equals positive 1. And again, I'm just taking this information from the actual problem. You don't need a graph to identify the vertex maximum or minimum, but I'm just showing you on this graph here. Let's take a look at B. Our vertex, we have a positive 2, so we're going to put the opposite for our x, or our h. So that's -2, and then our k is 3. And I forgot to circle maximum right here. So does this graph have a maximum or minimum? Where our a is positive, right? So that graph goes up, all right? So that would be a minimum because that would be the lowest point on the graph. And my vertex is -2, 3. So 3 would be the maximum value or the minimum value of that graph there. Our axis of symmetry is just x equals, what is our h? That is -2. All right. So right here, it cuts that graph in half. So this would be x equals -2, and I'm going to actually, well, I already put the answer there for our axis of symmetry. All right, and the last one here, we don't have it in vertex form already, so I'm going to rewrite it. Since I have a positive 2 here, I can subtract negative 2 from both, or subtract 2 from both sides. And that leaves me with, I'm going to replace this with the y. So if I subtract 2, that is going to be x plus 3 squared minus 2. And then on my left-hand side, I'm just going to put the y value. So we just really move this 2 to the other side. If it were already negative, of course, we would add it. All right, so now we have an h and a k. So 3 negative 2, or not 3, it's going to be a negative 3, because remember we have to put the opposite, negative 2. That graph, if we don't see a value right here for a, it is understood positive 1. So that graph is going to go up. So that is a minimum. All right, and our minimum is at negative 2, and our axis of symmetry would be x is equal to negative 3. And so this is where that graph is cut in half equally. So this is the graph x equals negative 3. So now remember that the vertex is h and k. We're going to always put the opposite value here. So here that was a negative 1, we put positive 1. Here it was a positive 2, so we put negative 2. Here we have a positive 3, so we put negative 3. Our k value will stay the same. To determine if it's a maximum or minimum, if a is positive, that graph goes up, and so you're going to have a minimum. If a is negative, that graph goes down. Forgot my n here. And so that graph is going to have a maximum. And axis of symmetry is just the x value of your vertex. So to write that equation, we put x equals whatever the x value of our vertex is. All right. So now next, I want to have you try 3 problems on your own. All right, so I have some problems here that I would like for you to try on your own. So go ahead and pause the video and try these 3 problems on your own. So go ahead and check your work. I hope you got the problems correct. I did add a bonus question at the bottom. That question is not written in vertex form, but you can figure out the vertex, minimum and maximum value, and axis of symmetry from the information you should already know. So hopefully you got them correct. Go ahead and pause and check your answers. And if you didn't quite get them all correct, just analyze the work here a little bit more. Alright, so we reached the end of our lesson. Some related videos are solving quadratics by completing the square, factoring perfect square trinomials. If you haven't already, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And once again, I want to thank you for learning with me.